agenda for today. We're going to cover a few topics. One is waterway traffic flow pattern and harbor safety. Two, we're looking at the radio bags and proper usage of the equipment, how to take care of your equipment, your boat, your paddle, and then dock etiquette and social distancing at the facility during our practice, and general paddler safety tips as well. So we're going to start here with Erik, and Erik will be discussing waterway navigation and traffic flow patterns on the gorge and in the Victoria Harbour, and he'll be covering the radio bags and the proper usage of that equipment as well. So Erik, over to you.
There, am I unmuted? Hopefully.
You sure are.
Okay, great. I do want to take a moment to recognize a few people before we start who are special guests today. Mike Sylvester is the harbor master here in Victoria, so he's responsible for the aerodrome, and he's also responsible for all the movements that go on in and out of the harbor, including our neck of the woods all the way up technically until the Selkirk Trestle. So that includes our footprint, our primary footprint. And Nathan Troost is also, he's one of the harbor patrol that work for Mike. And Tim, I didn't see if Tim's here or not, but if he is, welcome as well. And then also Rachel is the new head sort of boathouse, head of rowing for Gorge Narrows. So welcome as well, Rachel. So I'm going to do a couple of a bit of fancy footwork here with some screen sharing. So I'm first going to talk about the harbor flow. I've tailored this particular map to be relevant to paddlers, but historically speaking, the flow pattern north of Johnson Street Bridge is what used to be called a gentleman's agreement between all of the big players on the gorge, and that was St. Michael's, Fairway Gorge, and Gorge Narrows. So we all got together, and then subsequently we got together with VCKC, Ocean River, and a number of other smaller operations on the water. And we had a number of workshops about 5 years ago to address the flow pattern. And this flow pattern stems from those discussions. So I'm just gonna share my screen and talk about this flow pattern. Here we go. So Marcus, can you see what I'm seeing? It's the map of the gorge. Just wave your hand. Okay, so I'm gonna zoom out a little bit. So again, this one is applicable to paddlers and to FGPC principally. So what I'm going to do is start in the most complicated zone, which is right where St. Michael's and Gorge Narrows and FGPC are located. So I'm just going to zoom in here, right up here. So if you can see my cursor is just below the upper part where it says Selkirk Trestle. So FGPC, St. Michael's, and Gorge Narrows are all right in here. And we share this big dock complex in the promenade area on the east side of the gorge. What's really important here is that, the clubs are located in the most complicated part of the gorge in terms of navigational hazards. And many of us over the years have seen rowing shells and paddling craft come full tilt underneath the trestle here, heading southbound usually, and then they come. We can watch from the club area. They come to a dead stop. In cartoon land, that's funny, but for those of us who don't live in cartoons, we know whenever that happens, it's thousands of dollars of damage usually. For paddling craft, it can be a little bit less expensive if it's just the rudder that gets hit. But if it's a rowing shell or an OC6, an ultralight OC6, when they come to a dead stop right here on this reef, it amounts to thousands of dollars of damage. So just bear that in mind. A rudder is replaceable. One of our FGPC rudders is about $250, which is nothing to, I still wince at $250. So let's start here at the club. We're right here at the club. For the most part, the general rule of thumb is that the rowers turn, they launch from their rowing dock and they turn a nice sharp angle, the way rowing shells do, around close to the trestle, and then they start pointing south toward Bay Street Bridge. Our job is to stay out of the way of rowing shells because they are less maneuverable than we are. So our path is the green line. So you take the green line, you arc around where the rowing shells are turning. You go north of Halkett Island, which is this little place right here. And then you exercise caution if you're heading south, crossing the big wide area of the trestle, because rowing shells or other craft may be northbound or southbound, and you may not be able to see them. So you have to be tentative as you're going across this big gap in the trestle, and then you go, you head west until you are well clear of a good line on the west side of V24, which is right here. So V24 is this little mark right here. V24, whenever you see something pointy and colored and official looking, it basically means there's a hazard. If you're on inside water and you see something pointy and official, it means it's marking a hazard, generally speaking. So V24 is marking a hazard. I'm going to quickly zoom over. The reason I'm spending so much time on this is because this is where most of the accidents happen. And as Rachel has yet to discover, this is also where most of the rowing accidents happen. So I'm going to just click over to a video here. So I'm going to stop sharing this. And I'm going to go over to this video. Oh, wait a second. I have to share it first. Share. Video. Share. All right. Marcus, can you see this video? Okay, great. So I'm going to go to the beginning of it. Wait 1 second. There we go. All right. So here we are. I took this drone footage last week, just to be useful to Greg down at St. Michael's. So here, I'll just press the start button. So the big concrete marker here is marking a reef, as you can really see. Actually, I'm going to go back here. Let me pause here. All right. So this marker right here that I'm zooming around with the mouse, Transport Canada removed the old marker. Mike, plug your ears. Anyway, so Transport Canada removed the marker, which used to be right here, and they moved it inside by about 2 meters. Now, you know, most powered craft would steer well clear, but paddlers have a habit, rowers don't, but paddlers do, of just skimming these markers. And what happens now is that if you skim this new marker, you will hit reef, as you can really see with this low tide image. So please, paddlers, make sure that you give this a wide berth now. FGPC does not permit paddling craft to go on the inside of these markers because this is a reef and it's very shallow. You can see recreational kayakers sometimes going on the inside or the the west side of that marker, but we do not permit it at all. So the rule of thumb is, as you're going north or south, you're heading close to this big marker here, but not too close. And you're heading toward V24, which you can just see right there. You're going to be heading always on the west side of V24. So we're just going to start approaching it again. So I'm going to stop right here. This is low tide. Right here, we actually put a small navigational buoy. It's actually a fender, but we attached a small fender right here on this rock. You can't really see it because it's covered in seaweed. It's important to recognize that this is very likely the least, this is the reef that gets hit the least. And the reason that we have a marker there is because there's a big hook that holds the marker in place, and we're not permitted, we're not Transport Canada, we're not permitted to attach objects, but just bear in mind that this is one of 3 reefs, and you'll really see this very clearly in a moment. So we're just going to keep going. And we're going to turn around now so you get a different perspective. So just wait. I'm the drone pilot and I was in a rush, so forgive the lack of, okay, here we go. So you can see this is the reef that's marked. Over here is V24, right over here. There's the marked reef. This is where all the rowing shells hit, right here. See this one right here? Rowing shells come straight. If the tide is too low, they'll crunch right here, and rowing shells are not built like they're even worse than carbon fiber boats because they're They're made of a kind of honeycomb, depending on the manufacturer, they're very expensive to fix. Our boats, our rudders will hit here. Our rudders will also hit right here. So this is why we ask you to always head on the inside of V24, the shore side, meaning the west side. So over here, you'll want to head here. As you're heading north towards the trestle, you want to be very careful poking your nose right in here, because rowing shells or other watercraft may be southbound towards you and they can't see you. It's your job coming into the main line. It's your job to give way. Always paddlers should give way right here. So be very tentative. The long line in the agreement that we've struck and that's been in place for many a year, the long line has right of way. And I'm going to show that to you right now. So I'm going to stop this. And I'm going to go back to the map. So here we are back at the map. So I'm going to show you what I mean by the long line. So where we are, right in this sort of club zone where St. Michael's and Gorge Narrows and FGPC all are, whenever you're coming into the long line, it's your job to yield. And that applies to rowing shells too. Rowing shells, paddlecraft, whatever it might be. The long line is this line starting up here. So here we are at Tilikum Bridge. The long line is this white line that goes all the way down underneath the trestle, past V24, past the marker here, underneath Bay Street Bridge, and all the way down to Johnson Street Bridge. That's what's called the long line. So always remember the long line has right of way. Shorter lines that are coming into the long line at any point along the way, their job is to yield. So if hopefully that's clear. If you have any questions, you can raise your hand with the device, the sort of buttons in the control panel, or we'll take questions later. So I'm going to show you the short lines. The short lines, I'm going to zoom in again. The rowing shells.
If I could, Eric, they can also type it into the chat box, and so we'll have it written.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
Let me also say that this session is being recorded and it will be distributed and distributed by link to people who are interested after this, so you can review it. All right, so if there's no more questions about V24 and Halkett Island, as you're doing our 500-meter course, which a lot of us do, we start at Bay Street Bridge, we head north towards FGPC and St. Michael's, and the finish line for most of our races is right smack in the middle of the rowing dock at St. Michael's and Gorge Narrows. So that is the finish line of the 500-meter mark. Then, generally speaking, you will go up towards the trestle, and our job as paddlers, generally speaking, is to loop behind Halkett Island on the north side of Halkett Island and then head back south. My preference, almost all the time, is to go again to the west side of V24 as you're heading back down. Remember, as you're coming into that long line again, your job is to yield to oncoming traffic. Always, always. And especially rowing shells, if they're underway, it's not that rowing shells are more important, it's the fact that they just cannot maneuver. They can't stop, they can't turn as easily. It's just more, Marcus and I both know, because, I'll tell Rachel this now, we won the corporate rowing challenge, but I should say that we certainly learned the difference in maneuverability between rowing craft and paddlecraft, for sure. Now, rowers are just as courteous. If they know that we're running a race, they will give way, and they do all the time. If we're running time trials, the people in the coach boats and so on, they know that we're going to give, that they will give way to our time trial or a race or whatever it might be. Again, I'll go back to what is called a gentleman's agreement, or just a basic courtesy between users of the gorge. All right, so that's the one long line. The other one, a short line rather, the other one is around Bay Street Bridge. Now, this is where a lot of accidents happen. Rowing shells, for example, may be heading southbound, and they're taking the long line, I should point out, all the way down to Johnson. Lots of paddlers will loop around the stanchions that hold up Bay Street Bridge, hopefully forever, and they must be aware that their job is to yield. That's a hazardous area. If you see rowing shells underway coming towards you, don't cross if you don't think you can make it. Don't even gamble on crossing, because rowing shells move at 20 kilometers and plus an hour. So you really, really do have to give them a really clear right of way. All right, so that's the one there. So again, if you're turning around Bay Street Bridge, that's breaking the long line. This is the fundamental rule. You're breaking the long line, you must yield. So we'll go back down here, down to Johnson Street Bridge. Rowing shells turn in this red loop right here, if you can see it, before Johnson Street Bridge, or rather on the north side of Johnson Street Bridge. Paddlers often go usually under. But again, as the rowing shells are turning here, technically they must yield to traffic that is coming north underneath Johnson Street Bridge. So again, it's just common courtesy. If you're breaking long lines, you must yield. This, you'll see this line here. This is the old rowing route. Back in the, I don't know if it's still used, but Rachel, nod your head if it's still used. But back in the day, rowing shells would come underneath here. Michael of Sylvester will be horrified, but they'd come under here, but only around 6 o'clock in the morning would they do that. I think the inner harbor is too busy now, and I just don't think it's done anymore, but this used to be the case. So we're going to
masters in the morning.
Oh, they might
early morning at 5 a.m. go past there, but that's it. Not no one else.
Yeah, they might still do it, but it's definitely the exception to the rule. All right, so let's go back to paddlers now. Paddlers who are continuing to go south, they will go on the outside, or rather the east side of these large stanchions that are next to Johnson Street Bridge. We call this one Brent's Pole because, well, whatever. But it has many horror stories attached to it. And the horror stories result from people going on the inside, the shore side of these markers. And we've had many, many accidents and costly repairs from people going in between. Maybe sometimes at high tides, it's okay, but not everyone is an expert at reading the tides. So as a general rule, FGPC requires you to go on the east side of these poles, of these big stanchions. And then we're going to go into the this right here is called the Coffin Zone, which Mike would know well. This is the zone where aircraft really don't want you to behave in any kind of unpredictable or erratic way. So you must absolutely, the collision regulations require you to behave in a predictable fashion. And here, the predictable fashion is to stay on the inside. This is actually wrong here. You want to stay on the inside, shore side of these white markers. I'll change this map. I don't know how it got shifted, but you want to be on the shore side of these white markers, heading up to the new marina, and never ever on the outside or south side of those markers. So this is called the North Shore Paddling Corridor until the new marina came along. But you can still paddle comfortably along this new marina, just between the white markers and the marina itself. Novice paddlers should be aware that there's significant rebound and churn that can happen along that marina facing that faces the main fetch of waves that are coming in. So you do have to be mindful. You can also go under the marina along what's called the paddling corridor. And if you're careful and aware of debris and so on, it's perfectly safe and perfectly fine to do that. Then you're going to come here towards Colville Island. There's a discretionary route on the outside of Colville Island between the white marker and Colville Island. That's fine, but it's not the recommended route. If the tide is normal, within a normal range, the preference is to go behind Colville Island on the shore side and before heading out towards V21. Then heading towards V21, you'll see a green marker. Again, I go back to my earlier statement. Whenever you see something official and pointy, it's generally talking about a hazard. So V23 is a big green can, and it is in fact marking a reef. On the inside where Barron's Island is, there is a reef there and people have hit it, and you don't want to blow $250 on a rudder. And if you do want to blow $250 on a rudder, your paddle for that day is over regardless. So please go on the outside or the center channel side of that green marker. Something that the Harbor Patrol have always pointed out to us, When you're coming in from V21, which is off the map out here at the mouth of the harbor, here's Macaulay Point. When you're coming in, or sorry, where's Macaulay Point? Yeah, it's here. When you're coming in to the harbor towards this white marker and towards Colville Island, you can become disoriented. It's really easy for that to happen, and you will end up inadvertently right in the middle of the channel. That is unsafe. This is an airport, an aerodrome right here. There are runways going east-west and roughly north-south. So there's runways intersecting here. You really do want to stay out of that area. You want to behave in a predictable way for harbor patrol, for aircraft, for pilots, for the traffic control tower. You want to be predictable. And the way to be predictable is to follow the flow pattern. And that is staying nice and close to Barons Island here, just hugging V23 on the outside of V23, and then heading straight behind Colville Island if you can, or if you're heading towards this first runway marker here, you want to make it clear to everybody on the water, both above you and along the horizon. You want to be very clear that you're heading towards Colville, that you're preferring the Colville side of this general area of water, just to be safe. The reason I say that is because if you're behaving in a way that a pilot, for example, is doubtful about, or they're uncertain, what they will do to be safe for themselves, for you, for their passengers, for the equipment, is they will abort. And every time they abort a flight, it's hundreds and hundreds of dollars. It throws schedules off. It's wasteful of petroleum. Just think of it that way. You don't want to waste fuel. And I think what I last heard, and Mike can correct me, I heard it was like $300 to $400 in fuel. And you guys who filled your gas recently know that it's probably a lot more since last year. So please behave predictably. And that's the whole point of this flow pattern. Marcus, I think I'm done. Let me just zoom up here quickly.
Eric, can I ask a question?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so at Barons Island, behind there, there's a channel that you can go through and get over into the bay.
Yeah.
If you don't want to beat yourself up against the waves and you're riding the waves back in, is that acceptable for private boats?
Well, what I will say is that's a separate exploded map. We don't have that right now, but I'm certainly happy to do that. The reason I do not recommend that to recreational paddlers who've not been guided through that area before. If you've
There's
never,
a lot of reefs. Yeah.
Yeah. And there's one wedge just below the tide line that is very, very dangerous if you hit it. And if you find yourself too close to it, it's too late. Yeah, there's no way. There's this big wedge. It's like a, oh, I don't know. It's like a big loaf of bread that's just sticking right beneath the surface of the water. And it moves, the amount of current right around there is quite active. And if you're not really aware of where to go, there's also reef just on the inside of those rocks, right around that whole area. But yes, Sue, I'm quite happy, and the coaches are probably quite happy to show people. We call it the elevator, just because it's like a fast track to the mouth of the harbor, and it's out of the main brunt of the weather and fetch that can come down the middle of the harbor like that. So yes, it's a great. I personally love it. But I don't recommend it to people who are not really, really aware, who've not been guided through there before. But yeah.
If I may say, Eric, Paul Agate and I went through on a zero tide in an OC2 and an OC1. And behind Barons Island, there was barely 3 inches under our fins at a zero tide. So it's not a safe place to be on the low tide. And Paul happily followed me so that in his words, when you hit your fin, I'll stop. But no, it's a dangerous place back there on low tide.
So I'm going to pass it back to Marcus in a moment, but I just want to give you 2 general principles. That we have the collision regulations, and they make for dry reading, but it's important as a good citizen on the water to read them and understand them. Also on FGPC's website, there is the rules of the harbor, I call it, and it's available along with this map on our website under About Us. If you go down to policies and procedures, they're all right there, and they always have been and always will be. So I encourage you to review that stuff. the whole point of collision regulations is to make people behave predictably so that people don't encounter accidents. And as Mike and his Harbor Patrol staff know, Transport Canada and maritime law around the world does not distinguish between who made mistakes. If there's a collision or an incident, all parties involved are at fault. So it's our job as a community to make sure that we're minimizing risk, and you minimize risk by behaving predictably and following the rules as best you can. And then the other thing that I leave you with, as I've said a number of times, if you see something pointy and important on the water, something official looking, like a post or a stanchion or a buoy or whatever it is that looks official, generally speaking, it's pointing to a hazard. If you don't know what it is, give it a wide berth. And with that, I'll pass it back to Marcus. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Eric. If I can just get you to cover two more things. One would just be the northbound route from Johnson Street to Bay Street, just making sure that people are airing towards the eastern side of the waterway. And then the other thing would just be the radio bags and radio usage as well. So I'll pass it right back to Eric.
All right, thanks, Marcus. Yeah, so I'll talk about the radio bags. Those of you with who take out club boats, there's a red bag on the back of your boat. At FGPC, it's the only club I know of in the world that provides everyone with valet service. But your club boats are rigged for you and ready to go every day, tied to the side of the dock. And next week, you won't have to use leashes anymore to do that. It'll just be tied. But anyway, so you get into the boat, there's a bag. Inside that bag, and that is John Thomas's suggestion, by the way, credit to John. But if you're in trouble or in distress, you've all done hoolie drills, you've all done capsize and self-rescue drills, but if something goes wrong, inside that bag is a VHF radio, and hopefully Mike can't see this when I say this, but Mike, the channel is set to 18 alpha. So, and the reason we do that is because the Harbor Patrol are the ones that are the most consistently on the water, and they can at least direct some help to you if that's required. So 18 Alpha is the Harbor Patrol channel in Victoria Harbor, and if you're in trouble, you just turn the radio should already be on, or if it's not on, just click it on, and then you push the big button on the side and you say, "Help, I'm in trouble." Most of us senior staff at FGPC and a few other mariners. That wasn't me. Anyway, most of the senior staff have radio operators licenses, which are really important. And if you're really committed, it's a fascinating course to take. I was lucky to take it with the Coast Guard, and we went into a simulator and did the whole thing in a simulated sort of emergency, which was fascinating. You're in a boat and it's moving around and stuff. But if you're in trouble, you don't, just use the radio if you have no other way to self-rescue, and that somebody will likely help. There's also lots of people on the shoreline who hopefully will see you as well, but the radio is there for you. And then I'll just go back to the northbound from Johnson to Bay. Marcus raises a good question. Lots of us paddlers tend to cheat the flow pattern. I do it too. As you're coming back toward Johnson, you go under Johnson, you stick to the north shore because that's where you were. So you're coming home along the north shore, and during the winter months when there's less traffic, sometimes that's okay. But as we head into a very busy summer, the flow pattern is important. So you need to cross over to the east side of the main waterway under Johnson Street and stick along that east shoreway along Ocean River and where the harbor ferries are, heading up towards where the most of the barges and so on, Capital Iron. You want to stick along that eastern side of the waterway. The rowers do too. They follow that path. They don't cheat like we do. So you want to stay on that east path and then head towards the big buoys by the rock and gravel area before you head under Bay Street Bridge. During the summer, we really want you as staff at FGPC to follow that flow pattern to avoid the kind of congestion and risk of collision that could happen if we cheat the system by staying on what is the North Shore. Marcus, am I done?
That is all. Thank you, Mr. Ages.
Thank you very much.
Awesome. All right. So next, I'll be covering just equipment care tips and for your OC1, for your paddle, that kind of stuff. So the most important tip will just be to know the waterway that you are paddling on. As long as you're able to follow the correct flow patterns, as Erik was describing earlier, you're on the right track to keeping your boat safe, and you'll be able to kind of avoid those submerged obstacles on the waterway, and you'll be able to stay away from other vessels that that might cause any kind of incident or collision there. So avoiding the shallow areas of the waterway is another very key way of keeping your equipment safe from any scratches, scrapes on the paddle, the boat, the rudder, anything like that. And Erik mentioned this a couple times earlier. It might be tempting to take those shortcuts. It might be tempting to kind of deviate from the regular flow pattern, but there are often oncoming vessels or other submerged obstacles that can be very difficult to see until you're kind of like right on top of them. And it's usually at that point a little bit too late to kind of correct your path there. So avoiding the shallows and just following the flow pattern as Erik was describing earlier. Another tip I wanted to cover was about kind of before you get onto the boat even. So when you're adjusting your seat, when you are adjusting your seat, please make sure that you are slowly peeling off the seat there. If you are ripping it off, peeling it way too fast, there's adhesive that is binding the seat to the Velcro, and that can loosen up and peel it off if there's way too much force applied. So again, rather slowly peel the seat off there. If you apply too much force and you're ripping it off too fast, it can compromise the stability of the seat. It can have the seat sliding back and forth on the boat there, which is just not a comfortable position for you to be in. And one thing you'll notice is that on our Club Hurricanes, for example, there is a little tab on the back of the seat there. So when you are peeling the seat off, you can grab the tab, you can hold the back of the seat, whether you're on the Hurricane or the Hookie, and you can slowly remove the seat from there. It'll make it, again, like a more enjoyable paddle for you when your seat's not sliding around, and it'll kind of increase the longevity of the seats as well. The other tip for your equipment care is going to be about the pedals and the rudder steering system. So when you're on the water and you're trying to keep your steering in good shape there, it's important that when you are making any steering corrections that you're only applying pressure to one pedal at a time. If you are pressing on both at the same time, you can run the risk of kind of snapping the rudder cables, which will put you in a very difficult situation. So make sure that you are only applying to one pedal at once, kind of relieving pressure off the other one at the same time. They work in opposition, and just gentle pressure with your toes in order to make those corrections. You don't need to apply full squat pressure or anything like that to those pedals. They're not going to take that.
Oh, I lost them.
Marcus, just wait. Marcus is muted.
Marcus is frozen.
Yeah.
Radiating from the flow pattern.
Oh, there we go.
You froze up, Marcus. Yeah.
Marcus,
Oh,
I don't
no.
know if you hear me, but we lost the last 30 seconds of your remarks.
Oh dear. What point did I leave out, or what time did I take off?
You were talking about pedals and not applying too much pressure,
Oh.
and then we lost whatever happened after that.
Perfect. All right, I'll reiterate. So the pedal system, just make sure that you are only applying pressure to one pedal at a time. The pedals work on opposing pulley systems. So if you're only applying pressure to one, releasing the other, that will keep the pedals in a much more, it'll prolong the life of the pedals. That's all I wanted to say there was just, yeah, don't apply too much force to the pedals and only make sure that you are pressing down one pedal at a time, relieving pressure from the other pedal. It would just prolonging the life of the system, and it'll keep you much safer while you're out in the water in case of an incident there. So that's what I wanted to cover for the equipment. The next topic will be on dock etiquettes and social distancing at FGPC. So first is just a reminder of when you do arrive for your practice or for your boat booking, please have your mask on. Make sure that you're standing in the green squares on the upper balcony, and just make sure that we're following social distancing there. Our staff will get you on the water as soon as possible, so waiting down below isn't gonna hasten the process. Just remain in your squares and staff will get to you as soon as they can. When you are let down to the docks for your paddle, just make sure that you are maintaining space between you and anyone else on the docks, and only remove your mask once you are actually in your boats ready to go for your paddle. Another big key point here is that when you are finished your paddle for the day, make sure you gather up your equipment and exit the docks as soon as you are able to. We just don't want anyone lingering on the docks. There are other paddlers waiting to get down. There are staff who are, need to head down there to sanitize all the equipment before the next round. Just try to leave the docks in a timely manner. Gather your equipment, put your boat away, whatever it is you're doing, and take off as soon as you are able. And the only other kind of comment there about dock etiquette and things like that is just, continue to use your best judgment and just continue on the awesome job that we're all doing to just keep all of our paddlers and staff at the club safe. So that's all I wanted to talk about for the dock etiquettes. And now I think we can transfer over to John, and he will talk about just paddler safety tips.
Thank you, Marcus. I'm just going to change my view here. I've got a few things I'd like to talk about. I'm going to do some screen sharing here. First, I just want to talk about clothing and nutrition. When we get back into our long distance, water and food is important out there. Right now it's a beautiful summer day, but I see people out there underdressed. It's like I see somebody on a motorcycle underdressed, and it gives me the heebie-jeebies. If you get in trouble out there, and if you get cold out there, and if you get hypothermic out there, things go bad really fast. And I spent 20 years as an RCM SAR volunteer, and I have seen it all, including having to pull a dead woman out of the water because she went where she shouldn't have gone and she didn't have the proper equipment, the proper clothing. So I stress, please let people know where you are. File a plan if you're leaving the harbor, especially if you're on your own with your own kayaks or your own boats. Take safety equipment, buy a radio. They're $99 on Amazon. I have one. I don't leave shore without my own Vhf radio, my own boat. And take the food and water you need to survive out there and the clothing that you need. I just want to back up for a second on Erik's comments on, could you let me share, please, host? Erik or Marcus, can I have sharing, please?
That will be Erik. There we go.
No, I want to share my screen, Erik. Can you give me permission? I can do it verbally too.
Or you can initiate it, John.
I'm trying to. I'm hitting my square, but it's telling me that the host has disabled me. Let's just go back to the colors of these buoys, which is what I was going to talk about. They're predominantly red or green. Some are green and black, but pay attention to the green on them. In the lateral buoy system around North America, if it's green and you are heading south or down the harbor, you leave it on your right. If it's red, you leave it on the left. And the way to remember that in your head is an old silly adage that says red, right, returning. So if you're returning up a harbor or going north, the red is on your right. So when you're coming back in from outside, everything's green and everything goes on your left except V24, that red spar buoy by the trestle. That goes to your right. So up the harbor, leave that red on your right, down the harbor, leave it on your left, and you'll never get in trouble, right? And give it a little room, as Erik says. Some of these rocks are close to these markers. There is a reef that has claimed some people. Oh, thank you, Erik. Right in front of Songhees. And that reef shows viciously at low tide, but at medium tides, it does not. And if you ever take the time to slow down, you will see bits of aluminum propellers from 30, 40, 80 years ago on that reef. And I know one person lost their rudder on that reef. So although you're staying inside the white markers, don't drift into this reef area. There's another one in off this point. So stay out near them. And on the corner of the marina here, just inside the white buoy at super low tides, you will hit your paddle if you're too far off the dock. There is another ugly reef there. So I say to everybody, if you get a chance at a really low tide, book a boat and go look at it all, because that's when you see the dangers. That's where you see the reefs inside the Songhees Point. That's where you see the reefs inside Brent's Pool. And it's where you see the rocks in here. I cannot tell the times I've seen people in the North Gap on the Johnson Street Bridge. Medium tides and up, you might get through there safely, but anything less than that, this is a rock haven, right? So you have to use the center span. And as Erik said, you have to be careful of all the boats and stuff that are in there. But, you know, the safety out here, now behind Barons Island, and we had one person ask about it, the only safe way behind Barons Island on a medium tide is to hug Barons Island in here, because all of this on the southwest is solid rock, and anything less than half a tide, you will hit it. So if you're in on Barons Island and you stay near Barons Island, you can safely go through on most tides, right? Avoid this. I've taken a OC6 through here.
John, I do want to say though, that this is not something that paddlers should explore without a guide who's done this before.
So the other thing people were asking about is a map. Is the copy of 3412 that I bought and laminated, is that still at the club somewhere? I bought and laminated it for the intermediate program, and I left it rolled up at the club for anybody that asked, so they could actually see a chart and see the danger. So I don't know where it is right now. If anybody can find it, it'd be nice to have it around. Okay.
Yeah, we do have it. I haven't seen it around recently, but we've been in a bit of transition between buildings, so it's around. And
it's around.
Yeah,
it's
we'll
a
be able
very
to have that supplied.
valuable. It's a valuable document because people can actually see what they want to see. Tides and currents are two different things. You know, if you're checking the tide tables for the harbor, they'll show you the lows and the highs. If you're venturing above and heading up through Tilikum Bridge, the current table is what you want, because today I think the tide turned in the harbor at around 3 o'clock, but the water continues to pour south under the Tilikum Bridge until I think 5:30 or 6. And the reason is it just takes that water pressure, the rising tide, to stem the pressure of the flow of all the water up in the inlet, trying to get through that 25-foot gap under the Tilikum Bridge. And on the big tides, where the drop is 2 or 3 feet there, I've seen a 6 hour, it took 6 hours for the flood tide to change up at the, so if you're going to go up through there, understand the tides and the currents. I'm always happy to help people. There's, you know, great courses online you can take, but understand the difference between a tide and a current to keep yourself out of trouble at Tilikum. That was it. And just, you know, be safe, plan. If you're not feeling well, don't go out. Yeah, and try and paddle with people. I see, you know, people head out alone offshore and they're competent paddlers. I just don't recommend it. I recommend that you paddle with somebody, with another person. You know, people like Darcy and Dwayne, those guys are out together constantly. You'll never see them out there alone. So paddle with people. Thank you.
Great, thank you very much.
You froze up again.
I think while we wait for Marcus to reanimate, John, can you hear me? Am I live?
Yes, you are live.
I just, John mentioned tides. Now, lots of you have seen this kind of thing. I don't know if you can see my camera.
Yes, we can.
Yeah. So this is the traditional sort of tide, sort of navigational aid that you see. I mean, the real one is more like this, which you'll see right here. And that's not terribly user-friendly. So what I recommend is an app called Tides Pro, or there may be other analogs, that uses something that is, for those of us who are busy, something called a tide clock. And I'll just show you what that looks like, because it's more intuitive for people like us. And that's what it looks like right there. So it's a super easy thing, but as John mentioned, you know, tides and currents are different kinds of things. So they don't, you can, if you think that what you're dealing with is tide and you're also dealing with current, it could get you into trouble. I also want to give you one cheater thing about what I consider to be the kind of immediate, those of us who are on the water all the time use telltales to figure out where the tides are at, what the wind's doing. We're always looking for telltales, flags, the texture of water, tide lines, rocks that we know very well. But there's one as you're going into the inner harbor, one at Pelly Island, and one at Songhees Point. On those big structures that have, you know, solar things on top, and God knows what they're doing at the top of it. But at the bottom, there's a white band about 4 feet wide and about 8 inches high. And that white band is what the seaplane pilots use as an immediate telltale for them that tells them they cannot go in on the east side of the marina in between Pelly and the Victoria Marina. That white band you'll see at Pelly Island on that rock structure. You'll also see it at the big sort of stanchion at Songhees Point. If you see that white band, John's remarks about the reefy area along the North Shore should be top of mind for you. The minute you see that, it's like, oh, I have to watch my rudder. So Marcus, are you reanimated now?
Yes, I am. It looks
Great.
like I must have died out earlier. Anyway, all I was going to say was that with the time that we have remaining, looks like just over 10 minutes now, we can talk over any questions that you guys have. So if you do have a question, just enter it into the chat, do the little hand wave thing that Erik mentioned earlier, and we'll address any questions that you guys have about just paddling safety.
Marcus, I'm going to ask if Mike Sylvester has anything he wants, or Tim, if Tim or Mike or Nathan want to add anything about particularly safety in the middle harbor area. So if either of the folks want to say anything.
Hey, Erik. No.
Try again, Tim.
It's freezing up. Tim's freezing.
Yeah, it shows you muted, Tim.
Hey guys, how about now?
Better.
Excellent. Yeah, I don't have too much more to input. I just want to tag on to your comment about the radios, though. Seeing as we're not on the water all the time, everybody should just be aware to use panel 16 if all else fails. I assume on your radios, there's probably a big button that will automatically switch it over to 16. So just have that at the top of your mind, kind of thing.
Can somebody from your group talk about the white flashing light system that warns of incoming airplanes? And when the runways are active?
Yeah, I can do that.
Thank you.
So basically there's 4 strobe lights on the main navigational markers. The only one that there isn't one is on Tuzo Rock. All the other 4 have the white strobes on top. Just like I have to turn off my loud air conditioner. So those are activated by flight services. So up in the tower above the Malahat building. And so anytime those are flashing, it means the aircraft is imminently taking off or landing. So usually within typically 40 seconds to a minute kind of thing, before a plane actually touches down on the water. So anytime you see those flashing, be super careful. If you're already crossing midway, just keep going. Erik really stressed the predictable thing. So, you know, don't turn around, don't try and be a hero, just keep doing what you're doing. Everybody has eyes on you, and the plane will just accommodate. But if you see them flashing before you started crossing, then stop immediately and just kind of hold your position. Yeah, that's pretty much it.
Great. All right, looks like we have one question in the chat here from Dale. Weeds on the rudder and how to deal with them. So there are kind of like 2 options there. One being just stopping your boat, reversing, getting the weeds off, and then trying to avoid them as you paddle forwards again. But the other one would be maybe a little bit more advanced. You can try kind of rocking your boat forward and backwards, trying to loosen them off the tip of the rudder. Requires a lot of practice. Your best bet is probably to just reverse and get them off your tail that way.
And then Gail had talking about, you know, out there at night, and some of these markers aren't lit. And I think that's just comes down to in the OC6, you know, the people we have steering them, are imminently familiar with the charts and where these markers are. And we can relate them to other lights and other land masses. And I think that's what you need to do. You have to know the harbor, you have to know the marks, and you have to be able to see them from the sky in your head, and be looking down as you go, and know that, okay, I know Brent's Pole's there in the dark because it's not lit. I know V24, the red spar, isn't lit. So it's a matter of knowing and being cautious, and yeah. She said she was in an OC12, but then I hope the Stearns went to that OC12 knew where they were going. And yes, I've seen coaches do things they shouldn't out there, and we all strive to be better.
Called Brent's Pole for a reason.
It's called Brent's Pole because Brent was a coach who smashed it. And yeah, some hands are up. Get Terry Curtis hands up.
Oh, and Terry.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yes, we can, Terry.
Okay, thank you very much. This has been very helpful, been great. I really like the idea that we've got Gorge Narrows participating in this. One of the things that I do is I work very hard at not paddling in front of a shell, of a rowing shell. They go incredibly fast. They are not looking at me. And I work really hard at not paddling in front of them. That means that if they're sitting still in the waterway and I know that they're going to be taking off, I don't cross in front of them. I make sure that there's lots of room. I paddle parallel to their direction of travel, and I move off to the side as much as I possibly can. The other thing is that I think rowers are actually quite nice if you talk to them. So I talk to them. And if, for example, they're stationary and I need to move around them, I will tell them whether I'm going to pass behind them or pass ahead of them and that sort of thing. The coach boats are also very good. The coach boats are, they don't want any problems either. But talking to people on the water and letting them know what you intend to do is a good way to avoid a problem. And that's also true of the ferries, the little ferry boats that run around. I think they're very good as well. I know people have got mixed reactions to them, but when a ferry slows down because I'm on a line and they decide they don't want to pass in front of me to go into a dock, they will slow down and I will say thank you as they make that sort of effort. So communicating with people, just making sure that other paddlers on the water know what you're doing and you tell them what you're planning on doing is very helpful. So that's what I found. Thank you.
Thanks, Terry.
Great, thanks, Terry. Terry makes a very good point there. Along with being very predictable on the waterway, communicating with other boats on the waterway around you is the best way of avoiding any kind of incident. All right, we have
a hand up at the harbor.
Mike, you've got your hand.
Question.
I go, or there was a question there?
Yeah, I've got a question. There seems to be some confusion over by the new marina with the harbor ferries. I've seen some pretty sketchy things coming through there with that new, I'd like clarification on which side you want the harbor ferries to pass the OC1, whether you want them to pass on the Alma side coming in or, yeah.
Stu, I'll dive in here. I think you raise a legitimate point. My observation as a small boat paddler is that the harbor ferries tend to want to hug those buoys when they should logically, according to the traffic pattern, they should be sticking to the east side of the shore side of the water, or the north shore, I guess. But and we, if we're heading back toward Johnson Street Bridge, we should be close to the markers. So. So I don't know, you just, again, as I've said earlier, you need to make yourself abundantly clear about what you're choosing to do. But I agree with you, occasionally the harbor ferries don't appear to be giving way. And when you're yielding, you need to make the fact that you're giving way abundantly clear. And that's not always clear with those harbor ferries. I agree. Yeah.
I personally haven't had too many issues with them, but I've seen some people out there and it's like, it's sketchy. Anyway, that's my point.
It's a very good.
This is Terry. This is Terry. Could I jump in, please? Those harbor ferries are attempting to avoid the those rocks and the rock outcrops, reefs that are off the Songhees. They're passenger vessels. They have a different set of rules to be passenger vessels in constrained waters. So they are going to stay away from, especially at low water, they are going to stay away from what they perceive as being a real problem for them, which is those exposed reefs. So they are going to move over, and they are bigger. They have the right of way.
Mike, I'm going to ask you to comment on that.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I agree with that. So, Mike, I'm going to.
Yeah, let me. So let me make a couple points, and this is a good question. I was going to bring this up because it is something that you know, as the season starts, we work with all the different operators, and certainly with the harbor ferries, they're a big part of the traffic movement out there. So let me make this comment first. The white buoys, the information buoys, for the vessels, you'll see them as a guide to stay to the shore side, and that's really what you need to do. When we do the survey, so we're actually a certified airport, so it puts certain obligations on me as the airport manager to be sure that there's no vessels incursion on the runway. So those white buoys are pretty much right on the edge of the runway. So if anybody is south of those, it's actually a runway incursion, and it sets off all kinds of issues that way. So in the last couple of weeks, I actually observed a harbor ferry eastbound from the Songhees dock, and they dipped south of two of the white buoys. There was a group of paddlers coming up, and then they went back up. Flat out, that's wrong. That's non-compliant with practices and procedures for the public port. It's non-compliant with, you know, any number of different regulations. We try to keep it really simple for people. We'll worry about, you know, all the regulations and explaining it, but you know, everybody needs to stay to the shore side of those white buoys. What can happen sometimes, if there is a group in a bit of a pack, and that has been expressed to us, that bit of a shoal there, you know, they're worried about the depth under the ferry, and so they don't want to get squeezed in. You know, in call rigs, there's no such thing as right of way. It's there's a, you know, a stand on and a yield vessel, and it's sort of, you'd think, you know, goes to right of way, but it's really not. It's about everybody taking the right action to avoid a problem. So it could mean that the harbor ferry has to just slow down a little bit and let the paddlers come by, and so that, you know, if they're worried about a particular spot, perhaps the paddlers see a ferry coming, maybe they can single up and give them that room. What I'm emphasizing to the harbor ferries is they absolutely cannot dip to the south side of those white buoys, because now it's a runway incursion, and it puts when the harbor is normally going with the seaplanes one after another, it's a little more obvious how critical that can become. You mentioned earlier, Eric, yeah, it's that's a comment I'll get back from one of the, you know, we have a number of air carriers in the harbor, and if they have to do a go around, it's fuel, it's time, it's a number of things. The other I'd mention, and it's good that you have that map tailored for the paddlers. For any that aren't familiar with it, I can certainly pass the link along. we have the Port of Victoria traffic scheme, PVTS, we call it. Harbor Patrol hands these out by the hundreds, and it's available online. We just amended it. We do a trend analysis on incidents. There's, some 900 incidents recorded each year by Harbor Patrol. And when we look at these, one of the ones that frequently comes up is crossing at the wrong location. We talked about the strobe lights, and just a little bit different, Eric, from the one you showed. So on the PVTS, it extends the seaplane runway all the way so that the southwest corner is actually pretty well at V23. Oh, there you go. Perfect. Okay, so we'll get you the new one. This one's been updated a little bit. There's some bit more bolder and some arrows to highlight the crossing a bit. But anyway, the point I'm getting at, if you're coming down and you're sort of, on that runway, the tail end of Alpha, if you're not kind of right over a little bit, you may think everything's good, the white strobes aren't on, and the challenge we get sometimes is the white strobes aren't on because the tower has told the plane to circle overhead because there's vessels on the runway. So it's important anytime you're in an area where you think, oh, I'm kind of close to the runway, just move at your best pace and get beyond that point. And then again, if you're crossing, say from Barons to Shoal, the same thing, just a direct bearing, get yourself across. And the other useful thing here, as much as some of this, may not apply to every paddler, they have their own route along the North Shore. This will tell you what everybody else is doing, and especially the taxiway there for the seaplanes. So you mentioned about the white indicator on Pelly and another on Tuzo, when the water's there, and again in the summer when you have plane after plane, they may be up in that area. So
up in here in the taxiway here.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah.
And then into West Bay, that area, that'd be like an inclement weather area as well. Just, it's all about the wind with them. It's another tip, you mentioned about the little telltale. So of course there's the wind cone on Pelly that people might be able to reference to see what's coming into the harbor.
This Pelly is here. There's a big wind cone on that right off the
marina. Yeah. So you have the other one on the Harbor Air Terminal that you could see, if you were just coming down, but the other one, might show. Another just brief comment too about the paddlers in up to 7 a.m. in the inner harbor. So the aircraft, one of the regulations we have is they're not able to take off before 7 a.m. It's part of the noise mitigation, and they'll be at 7 still early for some of the condo residents, but yeah, come 7 o'clock they'll be moving back and forth through there. The other, sometimes people don't quite understand how it works. So Victoria Harbour is really unique in a lot of ways, but one of the things is that it's a public port as opposed to a harbour authority. Victoria Harbour is owned and managed by Transport Canada, the government of Canada, and it falls under public port and public port facility regulations and practices and procedures. And these are all available online. People, can have a look at that. In 2002, Transport Canada divested a number of the marina properties, port facilities, and the GVHA, Greater Victoria Harbour Authority, was formed at that time to take over management of those shore-based facilities. But the Harbour Patrol, that's Transport Canada, and very much there to assist. Coast Guard obviously has a presence. If it's after hours, somebody's into trouble or something like that, calling on 16 will get you Coast Guard pretty quick as well. We don't operate in the evening. We're just there essentially to keep the runways clear for the seaplanes. And so it's daytime coverage.
Mike, this is Erik again. John, I'm going to ask you to keep that map up just for a moment. Mike mentioned the cross between this, basically across from the 7 knot to 7 knot marker from Barons Island over to Shoal Point. I want to be really clear that other operators on the water may use that crossing at the Transport Canada's blessing, but FGPC does not permit any crossings whatsoever between those two 7 knot markers. We do not allow it because we think it's unsafe for paddling for our paddlers. So FGPC paddlers cannot cross there. You have to cross at the mouth of the harbor, or you have to, or cross between.
At McLaughlin out here, yeah.
Yeah, between Laurel and Songhees Point, you can cross there, or you can cross over at McLaughlin over to Ogden, which is fine. And then I also want to say this might be a bit of a blessing and address Terry's concern and also the right-of-way along the North Shore paddling corridor, that as a courtesy and as a common practice, FGPC paddlers should be paddling single file along that area, along the North Shore paddling corridor, and also along the South Shore corridor. When you're going past those buoys, the expectation is that FGPC paddlers in crew boats and in solo boats will paddle single file in those zones for exactly the reason that Terry Curtis brought up. We want to make sure that we are giving way so that things like harbor taxis are not bound up by the reefs on the North Shore. And also that commercial traffic on the South Shore know that we're following a pattern and they can see that we're following a predictable pattern. So again, single file. Marcus, I know we're over time, so I want to thank Mike and John, but I'm going to pass it back to Marcus so that we can close up for the day.
Great, thank you, Erik. So thank you everyone for joining us today. We hope you enjoyed the safety discussion and that you learned something new. But that is it for today. If you do have any questions, you can always shoot me an email and I'll do my best to answer. But that will be us for today. So thank you for joining us, and we'll see you next time.
Folks, we are recording this. Thank you much, everybody. We're recording it, so this will be available to everyone for reference after the fact. Thanks. Have a great long weekend, everyone. Bye for now.